So thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Gianfranco Cecconi. I'm Italian, but live in the Netherlands, where I have the privilege to lead quite a large team working for something called the European Data Portal. It's probably the biggest open data specific program by the European Union. And it's many of us. So I work for Capgemini Invent specifically, but there are companies like Conterra that is in the room, and others, each for our strength and specific background, trying to bring this initiative together. But before I go forward, there's one point to clarify. Everybody in the room is comfortable with the term open data, right? And do you like this definition, or you're perhaps closer to others? Raise your hand if you like this one. This is the loosest one, probably, the one that does not even talk about license, that though is very dear to me. We need to keep it simple. So, okay, open data is data that everybody can access, use, and share. And the European Union realized this many years ago when they started the whole idea for the portal that today I lead. But since then, there were great expectations. So some of them more to the left were in terms of merely financial gain or financial development, growth, as many call it, market size growing by 325 billion in a few years, jobs created in the thousands, and cost savings for governments. And that's, in a way, has become part of everyday talking about open data. You will probably not even be surprised by that. The movement itself, when we started talking about open data, is usually identified in about 10 years ago in a few European countries. So you may not even, this is really not news. It is more interesting when you try to move to the right of this slide, that is the impact. So, okay, we have open data, assuming we are all great and diligent and we start publishing. What do we make out of this data? As the Inspire conference audience, you probably come from a similar perspective for what is specifically geospatial. But if you think generally, you may think of open data enabling better medical care, and possibly 7,000 lives being saved thanks to quicker response of emergency services. Data can enable decisions in government, local and national, and of course it can extend those savings back to provide better services to citizens. We may speak for a very long time and argue with these numbers. What I invite you to do is to check one of the reports that we write for the portal like that, the creative value through open data. Now, a few years old, perhaps we should rewrite it, available at that URL. The portal looks like that, and perhaps the name is misleading because it is much more. It's really a program. I used that term intentionally earlier. So what we do is a combination of let's say a search engine to keep it simple, but we also do a lot more things that I will tell you in a second. And if you heard about Google dataset search, we are very close. Dataset search from Google is simply a search engine for datasets that is identical to what you would find in your normal keyword search that you use every day, working for datasets. The other day, I started seeing people on LinkedIn saying, oh, finally, a dataset search engine. I said, oh, no, we have been here for 4 years. But nobody knows about us. We are the European Union best kept secret. So I thought, well, actually, this is not a problem. We are very welcoming Google because it shows how the ecosystem is maturing. It shows that there is more demand. It shows that independently from the European Union initiatives, there is a will, possibly there is a business case, and I hope Google knows what they're doing, they usually do, for investing in this area together with us and being different. My perspective actually is better explained, in my opinion, by showing open data as a sort of a value chain from left to right. And I will tell you how we differ and how we are actually, in my opinion, more complete at the moment as an offer to try to help the community working in open data today. So the European Data Portal does not work much on collection and creation, but our work starts at the publishing level. So since 2015, we've been networking with mostly national open data teams across Europe and beyond to try promote publishing. In many cases, in the early days, it was a matter of skills that were lacking in the teams, and in many cases, simply budget. So where do I find the money and the extra skills to justify publishing, to make things differently from what I do today? The way we addressed that was to offer e-learning modules that are available to anybody on the website. So if you need anything, you just go there and check what we're offering. We are running workshops that we call tailored support to try addressing specific matters. And this is something we do on the request of the national teams. So to a point, if you're close to the open data national teams in your countries, just tell them, well, why don't you ask to run a workshop on this or on that? The kind of team I showed you earlier can probably cater for most of your needs across a very wide spectrum. And it's not about us inventing stuff, it's about you and what you need. And on the publishing side, we also pushed a lot for using standardized metadata publishing, including standards like GeoDCAT-AP. And if today you actually find our datasets published on Google datasets, it's because they can find us through that standard. So in a way, the day they started, something like 1 week ago, we were immediately crowded by them. And that was quite nice to see. So on the discovery side, it is usually not that considered in a way. So, okay, we publish data, but then how do you find it? That was one key point for us, and possibly the portal component of the program is specifically about discovery, making the data available from the European countries and beyond identifiable and findable very easily by keywords, by country, by subject. So the portal itself addresses that specific need. Moving to the right, access. So how you get to the data, download, API, real-time data. That is something that is a bit more recent, and we haven't worked much yet, but we are working in that direction. From the kind of public we have, we see that there are a lot of challenges on real-time data. So perhaps we got comfortable with downloading APIs we learned about, but real-time streaming of data puts a bit of everyone in difficulty, and we will probably run some tailored support on that point soon. And use and reuse. Just before the last surprise to the right, I will make a quiz later to see if you can guess what the last one is. We do public engagement because we realize that data literacy today is still a big problem. So even before the skills, people still do not understand what the potential of data is for them. And we need to do this kind of education to also promote the skill as a consequence of that. So we help develop literacy, we publish news, we try to be on social media to engage them. Again, e-learning addresses these needs as well, and some tailored support on use and reuse also is present. And the last point, of course, is impact. So what is the point of all of this effort if we are not addressing a real-world problem? And this is something that came out also in the session before this in this room. In many cases, we talk about these great and beautiful technology systems, but what are we actually trying to solve here, right? Impact is an integral component of this, in a way, journey I've taken you through. And this is something we consider as part of our work as much as the value growing from left to right. We publish every year another report called Open Data Maturity in Europe. We can see how things are improving, the data, and across all of those stages is becoming more reliable, the quality is going up. Many of the problems you probably experience every day in your work are still there. At the same time, we can see improving the kind of metrics we use for measuring that are described in that report, but we also see more and more cases of application. Impact is still a kind of a mysterious beast, and I don't know if you found the key to how to measure impact. Come to me afterwards because I'm curious. If you haven't, I strongly invite you to join us. We just ran a workshop on that subject specifically 2 weeks ago, comparing methods used across Europe to measure that kind of impact. In many cases, we have noticed that we stop at the application level. So every national website, including ours, will show you lists and lists of, oh, this great startup uses this data to do something. Okay, but how did you actually solve the problem? Can you show me how you solved the problem? That is something we are all falling short, and there's a lot of work for us to do in that direction. So geospatial data, I'm not going to teach you anything. This would be the wrong audience for me to do it. But it's a substantial component of the data redistributed or make findable through the Open Data Portal. I believe the biggest single category on ODP is environment. And it's possibly just natural because of all the effort spent for Inspire. But there is a lot of attention, particularly in the open data space, for people to use and publish data that can support some degree of environmental action. And we are very glad to be of support to that. We also run a specific workshop here on Wednesday on trying to understand how we can work better together, and that's more specific perhaps to the theme of this session. And we particularly thinking to the three worlds of Inspire, Copernicus, and open data, and not just the EDP. What can we do better? We did a bit of an exercise. It got quite heated, I understand from my colleagues who were there, but these were the results, and perhaps they will be closer to your experience of Inspire and geospatial data. So we realized that we need to invest more in exchanging information and knowledge and data between communities of practice. So in a way, today we have this kind of three separate worlds, Inspire on one side, Copernicus on another, and the open data community separated again on another part. That is possibly not working for any of us. We're not exchanging knowledge, we're not exchanging data as much as we could. There were some discussion around barriers related to technical, semantical matters, but they are just part of the story. So a lot of the discussion then diverted on barriers related to legal, for example. So do we actually understand what license mean in terms when data is redistributed or simply published? And I'm not sure we all are that confident when publishing data or when choosing a license, for example. And it's not just about open data. And there are barriers related to governance. In large organizations, that is still a big problem. Who is responsible for these data sets? Who do I ask if I want to open it up? How do we work together to maintain a data thing as an asset, as value in the organization, not just as a piece of technology? There were some identified barriers that cut across all of those three areas, and we realized that there's more need for cross-functional competence teams. So we don't need a person who knows about the open data and the Copernicus expert. In a way, we need to get a bit more close together, also in terms of skills in the same people, or perhaps having facilitator roles that can move easily from one world to the other. And finally, again, the focus on the latter part of that value chain I showed you later before. So reuse and application and impact. And without that kind of engagement of the community of the user side, and without being able to provide proof of the impact we are generating by doing so, it's also difficult to create a use case, a business case to publish in the first place, and go back the whole value chain and go to whoever is running our department, our government office, and say, we need to publish more. So that kind of chain is really strictly linked together. We need to develop it at the same time, and benefits towards the end will feed back to the front. So this was a short introduction to what we're doing. Before I open the floor, a couple of glimpses of what's happened next year. So we are working to enrich the functionalities that are strictly related to linked data access and querying to the European dataset. The idea is getting away from, let's say, the more human-readable and more to the machine-readable component of the website, so that when we will all be replaced by robots, they will find data like this. In the meantime, I strongly invite you to give our portal a try. Check the documentation, check the reports and the learning material. Remember, this program was started for you, not to give me a job, which I'm grateful for. If you have any feedback, if you see that learning material you would like to see is missing, if you're close to open data national teams that need support, and just tell us, because we are there for that purpose. And And this is all for me. I'm very happy to answer your question, or if you want to get back to me later. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'd like to know what are the main success parameters for the European Data Portal, and a short overview how monitoring and evaluation is carried out. Thank you.
So for success, it's interesting to see how we actually had to change our attitude to that over time. So in 2014, when the project was conceived and then launched in 2015, publishing was still such a problem that, like probably most of you, we're still considering a success just the fact of getting the data out. So of all of that value chain you saw, we probably were like vertical focus only on publishing, and in a way distracted us a little from the whole picture. So in the early days, we were looking at number of datasets published, number of catalogs, that is, providers of datasets that we were listing on our website. And today we have something like 850 datasets and 80 catalogs, including countries beyond Europe. I was in Ukraine 3 weeks ago to welcome them to the portal as well. The latter question was, how do we measure success today, perhaps? So we have shifting focus on impact. So the portal, as much as it is important, has become a bit of a lesser critical component of the whole picture. I realized today from visiting the national countries and so on, the national teams, that the support component is becoming more important. So the tools, in a way, they're getting more comfortable. The idea of open data is not a news for anybody any longer, but going more in the detail of how you run a program, what kind of roles you need, how many people sometimes, how do you measure that impact, how do you simply examine a reality. Actually, there's an interesting thing we are planning to do in terms of experimentation, for example. Some of the countries we work with have noticed a correlation, and I use the word intentionally here, between the volume of freedom of information requests they get and data being published. So they say that if when data is published, the number of FOIs goes down. Now, that sounds great, but it's not. Yeah, it's far from being a proof of anything. So we're looking for an experiment. We're looking for an opportunity for an experiment where a large set of FOIs that could be addressed by a data set that is still closed. We want to observe it as how it changes when we have the opportunity to do that. That would be a fantastic, perhaps proof is a strong word, but you get my point, showing and documenting thoroughly how to a certain action corresponds an advantage.
Yes. We have one more question, and we should probably make both question and answer short.
Thank you for your presentation. I have just one thing I've yet to understand is how do you choose portals to be referenced? For example, for the French open data ecosystem, there is a GeoCatalog which is being referenced, but not the French national portal, which is data.gouv.fr. So is it because of collaboration between institutions, or because of the structure of metadata or something?
So we don't have a strict model of collaboration at the moment. What usually happens is that we invite the countries to come to us and to let's say, announce their data sets on our infrastructure, and then that gets redistributed. And to avoid duplication or to avoid noise, we usually invite the smaller regions to go first to the national level, publish there, and from there they get to us. Now, there's no enforcement here of any kind. And I believe there is a lot of space for anybody to do their thing, particularly because, remember I told you about before, real-time data and so on. I see portals, local portals, or to be much more important in the next future, because the data getting closer to the actual source, and bodies like ours being only responsible to help finding them, but data being there. So very loose coordination, and possibly is the only way to go looking at the future.
Just a quick question. Are you planning to capture the user feedback on the use of the data that they selected? Kind of a ranking of the satisfaction of, yes, this was the data set that I really used.
We want to. Unfortunately, this is, oddly enough, a new idea that was not part of the original concept. We know it is important, and we see some national portals doing this in a fantastic way, like France, for example. So it is on our radar. We're not doing it yet. And it's part of also philosophy problem there as well, that is, by definition, open data, you cannot really even ask people to register to download it, right, if you want to be strict about it. So some of it may be managed by volunteer contribution of feedback, like, again, the France website is a great example of, but we're looking for different ways of doing that. The University of Southampton, one of our partners, is going to run experiments based on publishing data in a way that is more similar to how you publish source code in software. So if you had a GitHub for data, it's not a completely original thing, of course, how would the interaction of users change? Would they use the GitHub issues more? Would they leave feedback when they find quality matters? Would they propose punctual changes in a CSV if they could correct the data? That is what we would also like to use, and it would be a nice measure of interaction and engagement.
So you already heard that we will do a joint presentation. It was foreseen to have a presentation of mine together with Lieven Raas from Information Flanders, and more or less the same one from the OGC. So we decided to work together and to have one presentation. But we will have two speakers, so two speakers for the price of one. So I'm myself, Danny van den Broeke from University of Leuven, Saddle. Lieven Raas is here and he will take over shortly from Information Flanders. And then we prepared the presentation together with Bart Lathouwer and Marie-Françoise Vaudroy. So I think she's in the room. I think Bart is somewhere else. Yep. Okay, outline is very simple. I will go back to metadata because I'm really surprised to see a full room on metadata. Why do we need them? And then focus more on work that has been done on GeoDCAT-AP. And by the way, many of the presentations that will follow now are part of this work. So I'm not really diving very deep in this presentation, but rather give the framework. And before I start, I want to thank really a lot of people, not personally, because then I would stand for 10 minutes here, but from the different communities. So a lot of people from the OGC, W3C, the open data community at large, and also, of course, of the inspired metadata communities contributed to this work and these endeavors. So especially I want also to thank the fact that the Joint Research Center of the EU took the initiative of developing GeoDCAT-AP and to experiment and to do a lot of things around that. Metadata. I think often you hear people, they don't like metadata. They have to do that. They hate it a little bit, at least a little bit. So they might dislike it at certain points in time. But we all agree, we sit here in the room, we need it. And metadata are everywhere, on every single item of our life, whether it's in books, unique identifiers, authors, information, meta-information about the book, on your Coke. I don't drink Coke, but it's there, on the can. On data, it's everywhere. We have everywhere metadata. And we know metadata, if you really want to do it decently, it's a lot of work, you know. And also Inspire requires it, because otherwise we can't discover. There are different functions for metadata we will not discuss in detail, but focus usually is on the discovery, the portals, that you can find the data set or something. But we should not forget that we also should use it or use it often to evaluate fitness for purpose. Is this the data I can use for what I intend to do? And really at the time of usage of the data and information, you need even more detailed information about the information. And that's different approaches, but you need all of this. And usually a lot of organizations invest a lot of time in the development, maintenance of metadata. And in Inspire, of course, in the portals or in the open data portal or in the data portals in general, we focus more on discovery. Then again, it's even more complex because we have so many communities and they all use other standards. You know, all Dublin Core, I use it daily for every document. I use Dublin Core to document my document. But you have other initiatives from ISA, not only DCAT, which is coming from W3C and DCAT-AP, but also ADMS, for example, where you can describe other assets, even software tools, for example. And then, of course, we all know here in the room our own standards 19115. But there it's also complex because we use for Inspire 2003. But there are new versions. So what to do with those? So just to say that it's quite complex. And Lieve and Raz has done a lot of work with Information Flanders, and he will take over now because he will give the setting of the study we have done.
Okay, thank you, Danny. So just to make it even more complex, maybe, we can talk about metadata in different IT domains as well. And we have, for example, the geo world. We all here in the room maybe know the best of all. But you have also the open data and e-government world, who is using metadata and is using other standards, but also other tools to describe it. And each of these tools are, most of the time, mostly linked to one of these standards. You have the same in the developers world. And as you know, with more and more live data feeds and so on, we're not talking only or solely about data sets. We're also talking about APIs providing data and so on. So this makes it even maybe more complex. And these APIs are published and described in other IT environments who don't know DCAT or GeoDCAT very well in a lot of cases. We also have the archive world, which is also important and very closely linked, of course, with metadata and data in general as well. So we have different worlds, different solutions. Why are we so interested in it as Information Flanders as an organization? It has also to do with the fact that our organization is an integration of the geographical agency, former geographical agency in Flanders, and the e-government agency. So when we joined together, we had two metadata catalogs, in fact containing more or less the same data, and I'm talking about much more than 50% of the data were in both catalogs available, in our geo catalog and in our open data catalog. So this is a problem when you, as one organization, when you would like to have your information findable for your customers. But in fact, it's not only a problem of our organization, it's a much wider problem that in fact, every catalog or big like European catalog has to deal with. So this is the GeoDCAT-AP family, and one thing what is really important, I think, to mention here, we were in contact for one of the projects I was coordinating, which is OTN, Open Transport Net. We were dealing with the same problem of combining geographical information with open data. Partners in our project were W3C and OGC. And when sitting together and talking with them, the idea came up to start a joint initiative, and then we started with the domain working group, originally the one about metadata, which is now joined with the catalog one as well. And the idea there was in fact to search for an initiative that was able to combine all this metadata coming from the open data world and from the geospatial world. And we had a look not only in Europe, because OGC is worldwide. What is the best initiative? What kind of initiative can help us to bridge, in fact, two gaps? The gap between the core standards and the publication on portals or even on Google in the future to publish metadata there in a better way. And of course, as I said before, the link between the geospatial world and the open data world. And it came very soon that GeoDCAT-AP was in fact a fantastic initiative to bridge that gap and to solve that problem more or less. The problem is very complex, so GeoDCAT solely will not solve the whole thing, but it was the best thing available, and that was not a conclusion of the European partners in OGC, but also the people outside the European Union, at least. So I think that was a great conclusion. So we started to write a report about, in fact, the GeoDCAT-AP implementation, with the idea to have it as a kind of report published by the OGC, also with support of W3C, because we were in contact with each other. And we were able to gather 7, let's say, very good examples of GeoDCAT-AP implementations. They are there in the right-hand corner. We got one from the European Space Agency, the OGC testbed 12 itself, the Czech Inspire portal, 2 European research projects, the Data Bio project and the Open Transport Net project. And also the work we did at that time in Flanders about the integration of our metadata systems. And also our Dutch colleagues from GeoNovum also had a testbed at that time, which contains also very interesting initiatives on that. So in our best practice document, so we try to integrate and try to describe these 7 different, let's say, use cases, and we combine them around 4, I think, very important topics. The first topic was the metadata input. How can we manually input metadata in the right scheme? And that was important for the open data and the geospatial data, so we had to deal with both. And of course also the mechanism that is, for example, used by the European data portal, the harvesting mechanism. A second element was a metadata publication into an, let's say, integrated geo-open data portal. So we would try to build up one portal software that was able to show open and geospatial data at the same time. The publication of metadata as linked open data was also one of the elements we would like to cover. And the last one was the information mapping. How do we map ISO 19115, Inspire, DCAT, and so on, so that we can, of course, publish it in one mechanism. The figure you see here in the middle is the way we are trying to solve it in Flanders, and this is the result of some study work we did in Flanders, and it will be soon will be published in English as well. The GeoDCAT-AP report itself is now accepted as a discussion paper, and we are try to, let's say, move it forward as a best practice document. We have some little work to do in the next months, but I think until the next TC, we will succeed in that to have that report available. And what you see here is just the structure of this report in a very broad way. Okay.
Yeah, very briefly to finish our presentation, since it's a discussion paper, it was not really, it was not providing guidelines and recommendations on how to do the implementation. So that was one of the criticisms. And that's why we want to extend the document with real recommendations, with real guidance on how to do implementations of GeoDCAT. And that's more or less the structure we will follow. We will develop a few examples, with, of course, explaining what is the example exactly about, how was the implementation, or what for was the implementation done. Then also the different technical environments that were used. Was it done with a CCAN implementation, for example, or was it supporting CSW? Also how the ISA tools that are available, there is, for example, an API to do transformation, how they were used in the implementation, how testing was done, what were the results of the transformed metadata. So the focus will be rather on the case 4 that was explained by Lieven before. What were the issues encountered, how were they resolved, and what are the recommendations coming from the implementation? So that is ongoing work and will be done in the next couple of months. And then in parallel, of course, a lot of initiatives are ongoing, and some of them will be presented or were ongoing the past months. But there are also new initiatives popping up in member states. There is still work ongoing at the European level for the European data portal and so forth. So these will be explained. Now, what we will try to do in the context of OGC is to structure that work, and we try to collect further initiatives and developments in member states by organizations, in projects, European projects, and so on. And for that, there was this decision to reanimate, in fact, 2 DWICs, domain working groups in OGC, that were before separate groups, but that now were merged, and there is a new charter in preparation that will be ready for the next meeting in December. In the US. And then there is a close collaboration with W3C. In W3C, you have the Data Exchange Working Group. There is also work done on a new version of GeoDCAT because things are evolving, so we keep an eye on that. And there is, as I said, a lot of new initiatives. There is a new study financed by Information Flanders. You have activities in European projects, because there will be more. And that's a call towards you. If you are aware of course, your own work, but if you are aware in your country that things are ongoing around GeoDCAT-AP implementations or on DCAT per se, please inform us that we can pick it up, because we want to document as much as possible in the context of ISA but also in OGC activities. I mention here a few examples, so inform us. And then there will be probably the discussion, and it's not sure what will be the outcome, that the GeoDCAT-AP might become a community standard of OGC. The discussion is not yet entirely mature. It will depend on what the big companies in OGC are saying. They have their ideas. But if it's becoming mature, it is possible that it would be the case, as was the case, for example, for KML coming from Google. It was an existing standard, it was used and implemented a lot, and it became a community standard from OGC. It could be a similar track or pathway that will be followed. But that's still ongoing discussion. That's an open discussion, nothing decided. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, schema.org is considered as let's say, a very important publication mechanism. We have the RDF, so we will research in another European research project. It was just on the last slide, Polyvisu, how we can move from GeoDCAT RDF to schema.org to have our metadata published, for example, on Google, but also on other search portals, because schema.org is not only Google. Some people think that is the case, but it's wider. It's a more broad initiative. And we're also thinking or moving in the direction of trying to go to what they call rich snippets, I think is the right term. It's what you see on the right-hand side, for example, in Google. When you're searching for a shop or something like that, or there is in our report a picture about the chocolate cake, you know, how the recipe, so that you also can find information about metadata, about the data set, how it looks like, but even beyond, I hope, toward visualizations, and maybe also towards best practice cases using a number of data sets. So that's what we are dreaming about in our next AU project. Yeah.
Thank you. And now, Thomas, you will tell us about Plan for All.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tomáš Mildorf, and I will present on behalf of 3 authors. It's me, it's Bente, and it's Karel. And we will start a series of presentations that are related around or centered around Plan for All, the Plan for All Association. I will start with some introduction, some brief history, and the evolution. This is the outline of the presentation, so I will start with the interoperability, which is the kind of center point of our cooperation, then the evolution of interoperability, and finally I will get to the association. I'm coming from academia, so I will start with some definitions. The Cambridge Dictionary defines interoperability as you can see, the degree to which two products, programs, etc. can be used together, or the quality of being able to be used together. There are other two definitions mentioned. One is from ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, and the other is related more to spatial data and services. It's coming from the INSPIRE directive. There is another quote from David Shell, the founder of the OGC, that interoperability seems to be about the integration of information. What it's really about is the coordination of organizational behavior. That we also realized, and that's the kind of way we are trying to pave towards the Plan for All Association and the community we are building. Starting from the evolution of interoperability, of course the concept and the definition remains the same. What is evolving is how we approach the interoperability, to what degree we go, to what sort of standardization and level of interoperability we are going to, and also what aspects and components in INSPIRE use this term components. What components do we take and measure and make interoperable? It's not only about technical aspects, semantic aspects, it's organizational, also legal aspects. So in 2007, the INSPIRE directive was set up, the European directive that lays down some rules how data are and services are published and accessed. Between 2009 and 2011, we ran the Plan for All project, 24 partners from 14 European countries. It was focused on spatial data, land use data harmonization, and during this project we set some foundations for the INSPIRE data specifications for 7 spatial data themes, as you can see on the right image. So including land use, land cover, risk zones, and others. In 2010, the European Commission issued some communication regarding interoperability, so gave some sort of framework to interoperability issues, and they issued these 2 documents, in European Interoperability Strategy and Framework, and it introduced those 4 key levels of interoperability or components: the legal, organizational, semantic, and technical interoperability. Between 2012 and 2014, we ran another project called Plan for Business. It was going from the standardization we previously developed in Plan for All. We went a bit further, so we gathered some data from European countries, and we started to do some aggregation and analytics based on that. So finally we could see some harmonized applications, pan-European applications, showing harmonized results, as you can see on the images below, which are some sort of data gathered from Eurostat, from land use, from risk zones, and so on. Plan for Business. In Plan for Business, we created some sort of business plan and started the idea of setting up an association and creating a community that would gather open data, interoperable open data and services that would be used for public, for general public, for developing applications, but also for commercial activities. In 2015, we eventually founded this association in January 2015. It was registered at the regional court in Plzeň. The founding members were the University of West Bohemia, Czech Center for Science and Society, and Help Service Remote Sensing. So this was the first step we did. Then we got support from several projects, including SDI for Apps, Foodie, and OTN. And in 2017, the Commission updated the European interoperability framework, issued a new interoperability framework, which is part of the Europe 2020, and it's aiming to provide some guidance, specific guidance on how to set up interoperability in member states. This European framework is a bit extending the previous framework by providing concrete guidelines and examples. It provides some sort of framework, still on very or on certain abstract level, but it's at least something we can stick to. 2018 Plan for All is running. I'm sorry, I will just switch off.
Was it difficult for me to answer?
Yeah, excuse me. So about Plan for All, it's a non-profit association of legal entities. We are trying to sustain results from previous projects. We aggregate large data sets, which I will show on the next slides, and we try to transfer knowledge gained from the previous projects and transfer that into, excuse me. And transfer that into practice. We are members of GODAN, the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition. Our members are linked to GEOS, to Copernicus, and other initiatives, Inspire, and so on. Here you can see an overview of the partnership, 48 partners from 20 countries worldwide. Various entities, including public administration, commercial entities, universities, and so on. Here are the three major data sets we are maintaining. They came up from the previous projects, so it's Open Land Use Map. These are global data sets, Smart Points of Interest, and Open Transport Map, which is European. So you are all welcome to go to our Plan for All website, and there you can find the links to these data sets. And eventually, last year we got 2 H2020 projects where Plan for All is involved in. It's the EUX project focused on farming, Polyvisu, which was presented yesterday, focused on policy making in transport domain. And recently we will be starting a new project in November 2018, Earth observation for agriculture. And this is my last slide. We are inviting everyone who is interested in cooperation, all legal entities, to join on the Plan for All website. You can find some more details and the application, which is assessed every 3 months. So please, if you have any questions, ask now, because I will be leaving just after my presentation, but eventually you can contact us through our email or any other means. Thank you.
Thanks for the very short but very important presentation. I work for a federal statistical office, and I saw Germany as a big white nothing in your overview. And it's happening that some of the federal states change towards open data policy. So maybe are there some federal states within Germany already more active towards your direction?
No. We don't have any members currently from Germany, and yeah, it's open for anyone. So it can be NGOs, it can be SMEs who will join. So it's not really addressed particularly for public authorities. So yeah, anyone can join. But currently we don't have anyone from Germany.